Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Nutrition for the Family. This is the 8th and last module, that is nutritional care for the adolescents. And in this first lecture, we shall be studying about the physiological changes and the nutritional requirement of adolescents. I am Dr. Jaspreet Kaur, presently working as Associate Professor in Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, Punjab, affiliated to Punjab University, Chandigarh, and this project is funded by DTH Swayam Prabha, MHRD, New Delhi. The transition from childhood to adulthood is called adolescence. This period is characterized by rapid growth and development at all levels, that is, be it physical, physiological, social, or psychological. In this lecture, we shall be studying about what are the physical changes, what are the physiological changes, social and psychological changes that occur during adolescent period. And then we will also study about the nutritional requirements of adolescents. Let's study first about important physical changes among adolescents. So the first physical change which we see is increase in height and weight. The process of physical development from child to an adult, it is called puberty. And during this period, the slow growth of childhood, it begins to accelerate until the rate is as rapid as which is experienced during the early infancy. Adolescence, therefore, it is commonly known as period of second growth spurt. And the growth spurt in girls, it occurs approximately between 11 to 14 years, and in boys between 13 to 16 years of the age. This is frequently termed as period of maximum growth. And growth in girls, both in terms of height and weight, it is greatest in the years prior to the menarche. Menarche is the time when the girl starts menstruating and she gets her cycle. So it is very rare that the girls, they will continue their growth into the late teens, as most girls, they hardly gain around 2 to 3 centimeter of their height after the onset of menstruation. In case of boys, the growth in height and weight, it will start continuously till the late teens, and by 18 to 20 years of age, the boys almost achieve their full height. There are many changes in the body composition also during the process of maturation. These changes in the adolescence period, due to hormonal influences, they regulate the development of certain sex characteristics also. Boys, they tend to gain more weight at faster rate, and their skeletal growth continues for a longer period of time than girls. Usually the skeleton system, it reaches the full size by the age of 17 years among the girls, and by the age of 20 years in case of boys. As the mineralization of bone increases, the water content of the bone, it starts decreasing proportionately. And the girls, they deposit a relatively greater amount of total body fat, and the boys, they deposit more muscle mass. Now it can be said that it is a result of the pubertal changes. The boys, they, as compared to girls, they have larger lean body mass, a larger skeleton, and less adipose tissue as compared to girls. And this difference in the body composition of boys and girls, this leads to difference in their nutritional requirements, as the lean body mass has more active metabolic functions than the adipose tissue. So boys, they have larger muscles, that means lean body mass, and the girls, they have larger fat body mass. At this stage of life, along with the growth spurts, adolescent boys and girls, they also develop sexual maturity. In girls, there is development of breast and axillary and pubic hair. Menarche occurs only after this rapid period of growth. So studies, they show that the recent years, the girls, they have gradually started reaching the menarche at a younger age than the earlier times. This can be partially because of better nutritional status among the girls. So in boys, these changes like deepening of the voice, then broadening of the shoulders, development of axillary pubic hair and on the body, growth of penis and testicles, they start occurring at the beginning of growth spurt. Adolescence, it is a period of drifting from the protection and security of parents to a mature adulthood. During this transition, there is an effort to develop self-identity, which revolves around the sexual development and freedom in expression and decision making by these children. Now, there is a strong desire and pressure to be accepted in the peers. So, it is reflected in the food habits, dressing up, and the group conduct by these adolescents. And this brings in turn many psychological, emotional, and social stresses and strains. The period of rapid growth is relatively short. We call it adolescent period when there is a growth spurt also, but the psychological development, it continues for a much longer period even after adolescence. Now let us discuss about the important nutritional needs and recommended dietary allowance for this adolescent period. This is the table showing the reference body weights for adolescents between 10 to 18 years of age. As we can see, this is the weight in kilograms of boys and this is the weight in kilogram for girls, and these are the reference body weights for boys and girls based on these calculations. So during this 10 to 13 years of age, we will see that the girls, they are weighing more than boys, and after this period the weight gain is more in case of boys as compared to girls. So by the time the child boy he reaches 18 years, he is weighing much more than the girl. So that is why these reference body weights, they are categorized into three categories, that is from children between 10 to 12 years, then 13 to 15 years, and then 16 to 18 years. And the average reference body weight for boys is 34.9 kilograms and for girls it is 36.4 kilograms. And between 13 to 15 years it is 50.5 kilograms for boys and 49.6 kilograms for girls. And for the last group, that is 16 to 18 years, for boys it is 64.4 kilograms and for girls it is 55.7 kilograms. Now let us study about the energy requirement among adolescents. These energy requirements, they are based on two factors. The first factor is total energy expenditure by the child or an adolescent and physical activity level of that child. The energy needs, they are computed for reference adolescents and it is assumed that they are involved in moderate level of physical activity. But the actual requirement of a specific population group, it should be adjusted for the actual weight and the physical activity of that group, especially when we are computing gap between the energy requirement and the actual intake, and these needs are to be filled up with some supplementary programs. For example, some supplementary feeding programs, midday meal program. We have to understand what is the difference between the actual requirements of that group and how much of total energy that group is actually consuming. So we can calculate and make changes accordingly. The increase in the growth, it is earlier in case of girls and it is little later in case of boys, as we have seen in the previous slides also. Therefore, the energy recommendations, they will be higher among the boys as we gradually move from 10 to 18 years. Also, the difference in energy intake between the adolescent girls and boys, it is partly due to lower basal metabolic rate among females, and that is why we will see lot of variation in the energy when we compare the needs of boys and girls together. Now let's study about the energy requirement with the help of this chart. As the first column shows the category, that is boys and girls, as we have seen in the previous slides also, that we can divide these adolescents into three groups. The first group is 10 to 12 years, and the second group is 13 to 15 years, and the third group is 16 to 18 years. And we have already seen the reference weight for the boys and girls of the first group, second group, and third group. And based on that, the energy recommendations in the kilocalories for 10 to 12-year boys is 2220 kilocalories. For the girls, it is 2060 kilocalories. And for boys, it is 2860 when they are between 13 to 15 years of age, and for girls it is 2400 when they are 13 to 15 years old. And for the third group, boys, they need much higher calories, that is 3320 kilocalories, and 2500 kilocalories are needed by the same 16 to 18-year-old girls. The calorie needs, they increase with the metabolic demands of the growth and the energy expenditure by the children or the adolescents. In boys, the peak calorie intake, it is parallel to their growth spurt. The individual needs, they vary, but the girls, they require less calories than the boys. Sometimes the large appetite during this growth period, it leads to adolescents, they indulging in the snacking, and they take snacks which are high in the fat and sugar, salt, which is low in protein and other nutrients. And adult female and males, they require less calories as compared to these 18 and 19-year-old adolescents. Growth, physical activity of the adolescents, they are the big contributors towards the total energy requirement. The calorie needs, they increase with the metabolic demands of the growth and the energy expenditure by the children or the adolescents. In boys, the peak calorie intake, it is parallel to their growth spurt. The individual needs, they vary, but the girls, they require less calories than the boys. Sometimes the large appetite during this growth period, it leads to adolescents, they indulging in the snacking, and they take snacks which are high in the fat and sugar, salt, which is low in protein and other nutrients. And adult female and males, they require less calories as compared to these 18 and 19-year-old adolescents. Growth, physical activity of the adolescents, they are the big contributors towards the total energy requirement. Now let us discuss an important macronutrient, that is protein. The pattern of recommendation for protein requirement is similar to the energy requirements. This requirement increases as the age of the adolescent increases. This meets the growth needs for the pubertal changes in both boys and girls, for the development of muscle mass in the boys also. And the protein intake of boys, it is significantly higher than the girls due to bigger stature of the boys. And at the end of the growth period, boys, they have 1.5 times more lean mass as compared to girls. Therefore, boys need higher amount of proteins than girls after the 12 years of age. In the rapidly growing adolescents, protein metabolism, it is sensitive to the calorie restrictions. So whenever the child is not taking sufficient amount of energy, the protein, it is going to be used as meeting the energy needs of the body. This results into malnutrition among these adolescents. The recommendation for protein for the maintenance of the weight and for the growth is between 0.75 to 0.69 per kilogram body weight for the boys and around 0.73 to 0.66 grams in case of girls from 11 to 18 years. That is for the entire adolescence period. And when we add the safety margin to these values, of the safety margin is taking into consideration the individual variations of absorption and utilization of protein, then the quality of the diet, quality of protein in the diet. So these are the safety margin. When we add safety margin to these recommendations, the values, they come out to be 0.91 to 0.85 gram among boys per kilogram body weight, and in case of girls it varies from 0.9 to 0.82 kilograms per body weight when we start moving from the 10 to 18 years. Let's study about the estimated average requirement and the recommended dietary allowance given by the RDA 2020 guidelines. And if we see in this table, the first is the category of boys and girls, and then this is the age group, same as we have seen in the previous tables. This is the reference weight, and the estimated average requirement is the recommendation which is expected to meet the protein requirement of 50% of these adolescents. So the first group needs 27 grams of protein, and if we add safety margin to it, the boys need 32 grams and the girls, they need little higher, that is 33 grams of protein. In the second group, the EAR estimated average requirement is 36 and 35 for boys and girls respectively, and when we add safety margin to it, it comes out to be 45 grams in case of boys and 43 grams in case of girls. And for boys of 16 to 18 years, the estimated average is 45 grams, and for girls it is 37 grams, whereas the RDA recommends 55 grams for boys between 16 to 18 years and 46 grams for girls of 16 to 18 years. Now the contribution of protein providing energy, it should be maximum 15%. That means, as we know that the protein, it has an ability to provide energy also. So if we wish to calculate whether the child is taking adequate amount of proteins, the protein contribution to the energy, it should not be more than 15% to make a good balanced diet for these children. The RDA 2020 guidelines, they suggest that the diet which is containing fat below 25% of energy contribution, they can adversely affect the growth of the adolescents. But the type of fat along with the total amount is also very important. So food which are generally low in saturated fat and trans fats, they should be emphasized in the meal planning of adolescents. The desirable level of visible fat intake for the adolescents, it varies from 35 to 50 grams in a day, because they need higher energy. The essential fatty acid requirement is 3% of energy percent for the adolescents. Because the requirement of fatty acids for adolescents, it has not been established by these guidelines. So the recommendations are same as we have just studied about the adults also. And along with these fatty acids, alpha linolenic acid, that is ALA, it helps in relaxing the muscles and the blood vessels of the mucous membrane of the uterus, and it reduces the abdominal cramps before, during, and after menstrual periods for the girls. So ALA is an important fatty acid for girls. This table shows the recommendations for the fats for the teenagers, that is from 10 years to 18 years. If we see in case of boys, for 10 to 12 years, for 13 to 15 years, and for 16 to 18 years. Here, in fact, for boys and girls, the minimum level of total fat energy percent should be 25. That means the fat contributing towards the energy, it should be minimum 1/4 of the total energy which the child is consuming. And along with that, it is recommended that minimum level of fat from foods other than visible fats. That is the hidden fat. That is the amount of fat which is already there inside the food items, such as in the nuts, in the oil seeds, in the grains. So it should contribute 10% of the energy. That is the minimum contribution to make a good balanced diet. But if the contribution coming from this segment is more, the visible fat, that means the fat which we are going to use for the tempering of our vegetables or adding over and above on our chapatis, it should be reduced. So the visible fat requirement for boys, for the first group, that is for 10 to 12 year, it is 35 grams of visible fat. And for 13 to 15 years, it is 45. And for 16 to 18, it is highest. That means they can take up to 50 grams of visible fat. When we talk about girls, the first group, that is around 10 to 12 years age, they are recommended to take 35 grams of visible fat, and then second group needs around 40 grams, and later 16 to 18 years they should take 35 gram of visible fat to meet the fatty acid requirements and meet the heightened energy requirements. Let's take a consolidated view of macronutrient requirements. We have understood and we have studied about the category of boys and girls, that there are three age groups, that is 10 to 12 years, 13 to 15 years, and 16 to 18 years. Then we have studied about the reference body weights for these adolescents. We have studied about the energy requirements, and we have also studied that we do not have any recommended dietary allowance for that. What we have is estimated average requirement. That is the amount of energy which is needed to meet the requirement of 50% of these adolescents. We do not add any safety margin in case of energy, because there might be chances of getting overnutrition, and we can always make adjustment for the different groups of the population by comparing all these parameters. And regarding protein, we have seen the estimated average requirement and RDA for various groups and of boys and girls. Then we studied about the fat requirements, that how much of visible fat a girl and a boy should take between 10 to 18 years. Regarding carbohydrates, it is recommended that for proper brain function, the minimum requirement of carbohydrates should be 100 grams per day. This is more important in case of adolescents who are opting for fat diets. They are avoiding carbohydrates, such as in case of keto diets. Minimum requirement of carbohydrates is 100 grams daily. And along with that, the RDA 2020, it has given recommendations for the fiber intake also. As we know, fiber is again very important for the regularity of the stools and in avoiding the constipation, and it has other good functions also. So the requirement is called adequate intake. We do not have any estimated average requirement or RDA for fiber. What we have is adequate intake. So it is recommended that for boys 10 to 12 years, they need 33 grams of fiber. The girls, they need 30 grams, and boys, they need 43 grams, and girls of 13 to 15 year of age, they need 36 grams of fiber. And in the last group, it is 50 and 38 grams of dietary fiber. Between 10 to 18 years, the acceptable macronutrient distribution range is an important index which indicates that how much contribution should come from each macronutrient, that is from the proteins, from the fats, and from the carbohydrates. For this group, the protein energy ratio should be between 5 to 15%. That is, the contribution of protein towards energy should be between 5 to 15%. The fat should provide minimum 25% and maximum 35% of calories. They can come from total fat, that is visible and invisible. And regarding carbohydrates, they should be providing between 45 to 65% of the total energy. Let's talk about micronutrients now. And among micronutrients, we will start with the minerals first. Since the bones, they grow in size and number, and mineralization, it continues even after the full height has been attained, the calcium requirements, they are higher during the peak of this growth period. In general, it has been found that the population from the developing countries, they are at calcium equilibrium even at the lower intake of calcium when we compare it to the developed countries. So the recommended dietary allowance, it has recommended an estimated average requirement and an RDA of calcium on the basis of accretion of calcium in the healthy adolescents. Accretion means the accumulation of the calcium and the phosphorus in the bones of these adolescents. So the EAR is between 650 to 850 milligrams, and an RDA is 850 to 1050 milligrams for boys and girls, and the tolerable upper limit for calcium is 3000 milligrams for these children. Tolerable upper limit indicates that how much of maximum calcium and phosphorus can be taken safely, can be handled safely by a group. So for this group, it is 3000 milligrams. And for phosphorus, the requirements, they are same as per calcium and phosphorus ratio of 1:1. We know iron is an important mineral, and their requirements, they are based on two factors. The first one is based on the physiological requirements, that is to replace the basal iron which is lost from the body, and along with that we add additional iron which is needed for the growth and the storage inside the body. So this additional iron, it is needed for increasing the hemoglobin, for the use of non-storage tissue where the iron is deposited, and along with that, the iron storage inside the body for making the reserves. And for the adolescent girls, additional iron is lost through the menstrual cycle also. So we take into account all these factors. So physiological requirement along with the absorption of the iron, because iron bioavailability, it varies a lot among different age groups, among populations. So these two factors, physiological requirement and absorption, are to be taken into consideration. So the RDA 2020 recommends an estimated average requirement for boys. It is between 12 to 18 milligrams, and an RDA for is between 16 to 26 milligram per day. RDA we have already discussed. It is calculated after adding the safety margin, which includes the individual variations, bioavailability, type of food, and cooking losses, etc. And for the girls, the estimated average requirement is 16 to 18 milligram, and recommended dietary allowance, that is between 28 to 32 milligrams when we go from 10 to 18 years of their age. And along with that, how much of total iron can be safely handled by these children? So for 10 to 12-year-old, the maximum iron which can be handled by these adolescents is 40 milligram, and for 13 to 18 years, 45 milligram is the tolerable upper limit. Iodine, it is another important nutrient, and the daily iodine intake of iodine in the iodine sufficient regions, it is around 150 micrograms, and this is easily absorbed by the gut, and any excess in the diet, it is excreted by the kidneys. Iodized salt, it is a major contributor of iodine in the diets. So the deficiency where the iodine, it is not sufficient in the food sources, or the people, they are not consuming the iodized salt, or it can lead to iodine deficiency disorder in the endemic regions. So the estimated average requirement for 10 to 12-year age is 70 micrograms, and 100 micrograms is recommended after the 12 years of age. That means after 13 to 18-year-olds. And an RDA for the 10 to 12-year-old children, it is 100 micrograms, and from 13 years onwards, it is 140 micrograms. And tolerable upper limit for 10 to 12-year-old, it is 600 micrograms. That is the maximum amount of iodine which can be handled by 10 to 12-year-old children. And for 13 to 15-year-old, it is 900 micrograms. And for 16 to 18 years, they can tolerate 1100 micrograms of iodine safely. And regarding zinc, zinc deficiency, it is not normally seen in the adolescents, but zinc supplements, they have been shown to increase the pubertal growth in the adolescents who are suffering from the puberty delay because of various reasons. This is a table which shows the recommendations for various micronutrients, that is calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, and iodine between 10 to 18 years. Here in this table, we can see the estimated average requirement and RDA of all these micronutrients. And as we have just discussed regarding calcium, it is from 650 to 850, and RDA is 850 to 1050 milligrams. Regarding magnesium, it is an EAR of 199 milligrams to 317 milligrams, and an RDA of 240 to 380 milligrams is suggested. Regarding iron, the estimated average requirement is 12 to 18 milligram when we go from 10 to 18 years, and an RDA of 16 to 32 milligrams is suggested. Regarding zinc, it is an EAR of 7 milligram to 11.8 milligram, and an RDA of 8.5 to 14.2 milligram is recommended. And iodine, as we know, the recommendation is in microgram per day. So for 10 to 18 year, it is 70 to 100 micrograms, and an RDA where we add safety margin, it is 100 to 140 micrograms daily. Let's summarize what we have studied in this lecture so far. We have studied about the physical, physiological, social and psychological changes during adolescence. Then we studied about the macronutrient requirements, in which we studied about the estimated average requirement and RDAs of macronutrients, that is energy, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and we also studied about the fiber requirements. Then we studied about the micronutrient requirements, and we studied important minerals, their role and recommendations for the adolescents. We will continue about the micronutrient requirements during the adolescent period, that is regarding vitamin requirements, water requirements, dietary pattern, dietary guidelines, eating disorders, and some nutritional problems of adolescents in the next lecture. Thank you very much.